Welcome to the Buried Dreams podcast. I'm your host, Elle Morris. On today's episode, we have Cygnus, a producer and artist in Texas. Stay tuned till the end to hear an exclusive track for the Buried Dreams Collective. And don't forget, follow us on Instagram at Buried Dreams Podcast. Enjoy. So where were you born?
I was born in Dallas, Texas on December 7th.
Dallas, Texas?
Yes.
What year?
December 7th, 1984.
84? How old are you?
I am 38 years old.
You look like you're damn 27.
Thank you. It's really sweet. Thank you.
You got really nice skin.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was born at 9:10 a.m.
9:10 a.m.?
Yes. So for all the astrologers and astrology chart people, you can look me up.
So you're born in Dallas, Texas. You were here. You grew up here.
Yeah.
Wow.
My whole life.
Your whole life. So you've been here 38 years.
I've left several times to try and make it happen elsewhere. And I came right back.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Why? Why do you want to stay here?
If you imagine like a sphere or like a ball shape or a globe, no matter where you are, no matter what your coordinates are on the sphere, there's as much east of you as there is west of you, assuming that there's a gravitational pull holding you to that sphere. And I always just found myself wherever I went. I always felt like wherever I tried to live or wherever I tried to go, I'm there with the same being, the same sense of self, the same ideas and advantages and disadvantages that I had when I was in Dallas. So more or less, that's why, yeah, I just... Everywhere I go, ended up encountering the same thing.
Yeah, I also went through that with my travels. I felt like I was...
In Europe?
Yeah, in Europe. I lived in Central America for a little bit, in California, in Tennessee, Texas.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was running away from wherever I was, thinking that a new geographic location could give me something that I was missing. And I don't think that's true. Like you said, I still dealt with all the same struggles and issues, and the same things were showing up inside of me, and even in worse ways, because you're in a place that you're not comfortable. You maybe don't have like friends that are that settled home base of friends and family around you. So
lacking resources as well.
Exactly.
Familiarity of colleagues and people who you've known for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely something that happens. That didn't only ever occur to me in a geographical sense, but it also occurs to me in a temporal sense, thinking that in the future, some kind of comprehensive fulfillment is going to happen. I'm going to travel into the future and suddenly all of my questions are going to be answered, or looking into the past, thinking that entertaining any amount of like hyperactive ruminations and thoughts about the past is going to solve my problems. We're always thinking that the grass is going to be greener somewhere else. Sometimes you hop the fence and there's no grass at all, or is the same grass, or
it usually is the same. It's like the same grass, or
it's the same because I'm me,
mm-hmm.
and this is my mind, and I can't comprehend the world in front of me without this mind. And as a result, I've never really idealized this idea or this concept that running away from something or getting away from something is a guarantee for, or it's even a basis or a premise for success or happiness or fulfillment.
Do you think the future and the past are illusions?
They don't exist. I could go into kind of how that framework came about for me. That'll be a little convoluted maybe for another podcast. But as I'm taught and trained to think, we can only impute what's happening right now in the present. So you'd have to think, well, what do you think? Like, if we can only impute what's happening, you're a data scientist. You know what I'm talking. That you can only impute what's happening now. Of course, it should also be true for the past and the future. The predictions and their guesses. They're like, you know what I'm trying to say? Like,
yeah, my opinion is I have more of a Buddhist perception on this, and not so much data science.
Here we go.
I think that, the past and the future are sort of illusionary. And all we have, we're time travelers. I have a friend in New York who told me we're time travelers. I was like, that's blew my mind because we're constantly moving through time at this one point in space and time. And everything that's happened before, like you said, doesn't exist. And everything that will happen doesn't exist. And everything that we think and our memory and all that stuff, it's all falsified in many aspects. I think back when 9/11 happened, and I remember being in my 3rd grade classroom, and my teacher came in and told us we needed to go home because the Twin Towers were hit. I was actually in kindergarten, and that memory is just like completely wiped out. So it's like our mind kind of distorts what had happened in that present moment. And I think a lot of times do you ever like ruminate in your bed at night and like, oh my gosh, I did this like weird thing and like everyone in the world hates me, or just going through these like mind patterns of like distorting memories and things like that. Like when reality, like no one's really thinking about that. Everyone's thinking about themselves.
Yeah. It's in the practice of meditation or mindfulness that we can embark upon, that we can take that precious opportunity to press pause on that, on our biological prediction machine and our guessing machine, and enjoy 10, 15, 20 minutes or more, depending upon your practice and your training and your teaching. And you can step out of the thinking mind and you can step into the Dharma, and you can really kind of expose the world and for what it is. It's a mirage. I mean, it's real and it's not real. There's the term sunyata, which means emptiness. The world is empty. And, like a lot of people might hear that and think like, oh, that's like pretty nihilistic and depressing, right? The world is empty. It doesn't mean anything. Like, no, it doesn't mean that it's empty. It just means that it's only there because you put something in it.
Exactly.
You assigned it some kind of value.
Have you ever dissolved in your meditations?
Dissolved.
You know that...
Can you talk about that for me?
Yeah, so it's like, okay, well, first I'd like to comment on something earlier.
Yeah.
It's crazy how dedicating those 10 to 15 minutes per day just to bring yourself back to being and bringing yourself back to the Dharma, which in my understanding is the body, right? Releasing tension in areas that you feel that are tense, and body scanning, going and say like, I feel the clothes touching my body. I feel the cold air like kissing my skin. And it brings that presence, because all day, every day, running, our minds are constantly thinking about what we have to do and things of our past that we want to change.
Yeah.
And I think we get so far away from the moment, but all we really have is this moment. So I think it's really important to practice meditation and mindfulness. And I'd like to ask how that affects your creativity.
Sure.
The second thing about dissolving, just quickly, I guess.
Yeah.
So dissolving is when you essentially become nothingness. So you're meditating and you don't have an identity anymore. So your ego is what gives you the identity, right? Your ego says, I am Phillip Washington. I am a producer and artist. I live in Dallas, Texas. I like the color pink, whatever it may be. You identify with these things. But when you dissolve, I guess they say that's like on the track to enlightenment. So essentially you're meditating and you become nothing. You dissolve away. One time I took mushrooms, and I took a lot, and I was kind of tripping alone. And I remember just all I could feel was my lungs breathing. And I was like floating out in space into nothingness. And I just felt like nothing around me. And it really made me appreciate, having a body and being able to experience the senses and having relationships with others, and how horrible it would be just to be out there with nothingness. So that was like an awakening thing. I dissolved in that trip, but I was taking I was part of some class with a Tibetan Lama in Luxembourg during the pandemic.
To talk about. I didn't really know you when I first met you. I didn't know that we were on the same track there. Okay, yeah, all right. We have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, well, I feel like that whole Buddhist practice changed my life.
Yeah, me too.
You can have whatever religion you want to have, and Buddhism can even be a supplement. Because I think a lot of people are against practicing Buddhism because they have their own religion. But I even if you have your own religion, I think adding Buddhism to it is such an incredible supplement to, being able to connect with the universe, the higher power, the oneness, God, Jesus, whoever you want to, Allah, whoever you want to attribute as the higher power. I don't like to get so attached to like words and terms and things like that. I do think that mindfulness and meditation and learning these concepts can really just open your mind up and help you become more aware of yourself and the way you feel, your emotions, and just ultimately get you on the right track to finding happiness.
I agree.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So how has mindfulness and meditation helped you with your like artistic craft and
what a question,
connecting with yourself more, expressing yourself?
What a question. What a question. In my meditation practice, we are, when I say we, I mean kind of like a perennial we, not like you and I or anyone who's listening to this, just like we people. In my meditation practice, we're trying to restore qualities to the world that it just has. We're trying to restore to the world its qualities. We're trying to give the world back to the world. We have a powerful and attractive tendency to get trapped in our mind, in our ego, in that Sogyal Rinpoche calls it chewing cud, just like the same thought over and over and over and over again, which is not really a creative act. It's an accumulative act. It's just adding on the same thing again and trying to superimpose onto something without form, whatever form that we're trying to give it. But
interesting.
In meditation, I feel like we're trying to give the world back to itself and to participate in this powerful mystery that we all woke up in some decades ago. And when that comes to my creativity, I feel when I have a balanced ego, when I'm not fully absorbed in this shell of a mind and an ego, then I feel like celebrating. I feel like making some beats, making some music, and joining this this cosmic mystery, this incomprehensible mystery that's surrounding me, that I'm a part of. And that's my creative fuel. It really is. Meditation really helps, and mindfulness definitely too.
I read this book, A Spiritual Path to Higher Creativity. Or no, it's called The Artist's Way. And it's a spiritual path to higher creativity.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed this book because, and it was essentially what inspired this podcast, was I was really into meditation and mindfulness. And, I started reading this book and I realized that I think what brings us the most happiness and fulfillment with life is when we're creating something. And when we're like pouring ourselves in, I think we're created to create. We're creators. And I think everyone in the world is an artist, but some don't identify as that. But I think we all have the ability to create. And a lot of times the ego can get involved, right? And it can be like, oh, that brushstroke wasn't right. Or like, and then it keeps you from moving on in the process. As children, I feel like we were able to paint and draw, and we didn't care what it looked like. We just wanted to do it. We wanted to just enjoy the process. And I think we can get away from that as an adult. There was
also the brush strokes in our minds that constitute our personality and our sense of ourselves and our being. Those brush strokes, you might judge the ones that you draw on paper, but what about the ones that happen in your psyche?
Ooh, that's cool.
I worthy of doing this? Is what I'm doing meaningful? And as adults, we definitely lose the ability to, not totally lose, but it becomes challenging because we accumulate a lot of baggage, and it generates thoughts. We think that we are an adequate judge. We think we are like an adequate judge of but everything's beautiful. As a child, everything's beautiful. I remember being a kid. There was this canal, this man-made canal, like a mile away from my childhood home. And I would ride my bike out to it some days during the summer, and I would like stare at it, and it's just maybe 500 or 600 feet across. And to me, I'd never seen anything like that before. And I was like, wow, what is this? Who put this here? And I was super young. I was like, what is this for? It's big. It's just like a naturally occurring thing, but it's nothing more mundane than like a city project that, carved a gigantic scar into the earth and allowed water to run through it. But for me, to my brain at that age, it was fully classifiably a kind of a religious kind of thing. And in one of my meditation practices, we all sounds, all sights, all sensations are the mantra of the limitless Buddha. Like everything is perfect, even the thing that we think is something wildly inappropriate. Like everything. Whatever you allow the mind to do, whatever it wants to do, you give it its freedom, you give it its space. In the creative enterprises, it's really useful to do that as well, I found,
Yeah, super interesting.
Yeah.
I also had like a similar thing with a creek when I was a kid.
Yeah, creeks.
It was like a man-made creek that was for, water retention. But it was like there were water retention ponds, and then there was like a little creek that just kind of went to the, those like big metal circles that kind of take water or whatever. And I would go down there and I would totally leave the world. There was crawdads in that little stream, and I was like, I remember one day I packed up my lunch, and I was maybe with my friend Sierra, and I was like, let's just like run away. Let's run away, and we'll just come down to the stream, and I'll pack a couple sandwiches, and we'll just like live out here, like down here by the stream.
Yeah.
I mean, in a place that it was very natural, but I don't know what it was about that stream that like made me feel so much connection with the world, with the earth,
Maybe it's just streams in general, because where does the stream begin and where does the stream end? And maybe we just kind of understand that as when we're young, that the stream is fed by the ocean and the rain and natural resources, and it moves out to some place. And then what does it do? It just comes right back to the very beginning. There's no beginning and end. Shunryu Suzuki, one of my favorite Zen teachers, talks about the Zen way of the Dharma. And he describes it as, like, you imagine wide landscape expanse, reaching forward, reaching backward. And on this expanse, there's a train track reaching limitlessly into the future, forward in front of you, and reaching limitlessly behind you, limitless train track. And that's the way he teaches to practice Zen. Just like, doesn't matter if the sun stops rising, doesn't matter if the sand turns into ice, if it rains, if it pours, you just go on along. Don't ever stop, and have trust and faith and compassion for yourself. I think as a children, we may understand things a little bit more tacitly than adults. Looking at things like streams, because it just looks like this limitless.
Yeah. Cyclical.
Yeah, exactly. It's a cycle. Yeah.
I had this weird thought the other day that I was like trying to understand infinity in my brain.
Oh,
and
ouch.
My brain hurts.
Ow.
And I was like, what is like the only thing that we know that is infinite, that just keeps on going and it never ends? And I was like, a circle, So I was wondering, this is probably totally wrong, but my brain was like, what if the universe is a circle, and how the water flows and it's constantly going through the cycle where you're getting water's leaving, and it just keeps on coming and coming, and it never ends. It's like a cyclical process. Circles, if you go around the circle, you can just keep going forever and ever. It never stops. So I'm wondering if like universe is like, we can't really sense it, but it's like bent And so when we're like looking out, I was like, but when we look out into space, we can see so many different things. But maybe we're like seeing some sort of like reflection of the bend, and we're just seeing things from different spots. Like as we're like trying to search out deeper, it's like bending.
Space curves.
It does?
Yeah. Space-time curvature refers to, so you've seen like, images of like the Hubble telescope where there will be kind of like, it's called a gravitational lensing, where surrounding a galaxy, it'll look kind of like there's a strange kind of focal point where the light, in the Hubble telescope photos, you can see these focal points of light. And what they indicate is a point at which gravity is literally bending the light around it. Space can curve, and it's bent by the mass of the object. Without getting into, cycles. A waveform is a cycle, like a square wave or a sawtooth or a sine wave.
I don't know. A sound wave, you mean?
A sine wave.
I don't know what that is.
If I go bzzz, it sounds like that's one sound. It's really just lots of and lots of it's just like lots of bzzz, and they're dancing. The and the are playing with each other, and they're giving this illusion of one thing. So if we look at as one part of the cycle and as the other part, then we combine them. How fast is and how fast is happening? And then we can play with that. We can go, or we can make it go faster. We can go, and
that's cool.
Yeah, but that's just a cycle of and right. And so if we were to look at the universe as a sound, as an emanation of cosmic, it's like some kind of cosmic waveform, then yeah, it's definitely a cycle, beginningless and endless cycle. The Hindus and all the Eastern traditions, they all thought that the universe works in kalpas, the yugas, and it just starts, restarts, and it's like a cycle, reincarnation, etc.
I read a lot of books and things like that, but I would like, after this, we can kind of chat about like what you've been reading and stuff like that.
Definitely.
If you could choose one book that has influenced you, what would it be?
Ooh, wow.
One book, maybe two if you're feeling excited.
I would say I'm going to do a lateral jump here, because you're going to expect me to say something by some Buddhist teacher or like I have like a billion that I could recommend from there.
Yeah.
But instead, I'm going to recommend a fictional novel.
Okay.
Called The Memory Police by a woman named Yoko Ogawa.
I'm going to write that down. The Memory Police.
Yeah. If you could, it's hard to talk about it without providing spoilers, but I'll give a loose premise of it. It's a fictional tale based in a fictional city in Japan where there's not like a Nazi Gestapo where, your ethnicity or your religion is the reason for your persecution, but there's the memory police. People who have memories are persecuted. People who have this capability of reflecting on art and music and artifacts and family and stuff. The memory police will come to your house if you have like something that reminds you of your childhood, and they'll fucking kill you. And it's a very, very, I think that is probably the most important book I've read in the past 10 or 15 years, because it draws direct correlation to kind of what we're seeing now with the powers that be, the social media people, that everything, and how they're just making it impossible to feel grounded in happy memories and
completely
cozy. We can't find ourselves because we're not allowed to even look at ourselves,
Well, I think that ourselves is not necessarily the labels that we put on it. And I feel that social media forces us to develop an identity that is not really existing. It's just what we create, and it's a false image.
Fake. It's fake. But when I think about, for example, something that really grounds me is thinking about the sound of my mother's voice. My mom passed away in 2007. When I think about the sound of her voice, that is extraordinarily grounding. To think about the color of the wallpaper in the home that I grew up in, or the toys that I used to play with, or how the sunlight would come through the blinds in my bedroom and create this really interesting pattern on the carpet on the floor. In Yoko Ogawa's book, The Memory Police, those things become illegal.
How do they wipe away your memories?
They come to your house and boom, kill you, they kidnap you.
So you're just not allowed to go into the past in your brain?
People are not allowed to retain memories. They're not allowed to retain enjoyable, not even enjoyable, but non-enjoyable memories. They're not allowed to reflect. They're not allowed to have a past. They're not allowed to have an interior. We know that the past isn't real, but in the human body, I feel like the past maintains a kind of like a neuromuscular interior. You know, it's stored in your body. And the memory police in this book, they go around to people's houses and they steal things from their homes that remind them of the past, that give them this grounded sense of interiority, of having a sovereign existence in the world, of having, you know, of being a part of the world, like I was talking about. They're not able to restore the world in front of them, even through meditation if they wanted to, because there's nothing to reflect upon. You've hung out with the Tibetans. They have all kinds of ritual artifacts and statues and dolls and stuff that they pray to. The memory police would take that away. They would say, that's illegal. That's not serving our society. And you need to go to prison.
Yeah, I never met my Lama in real life. It was during the pandemic when I was in Portugal, and my therapist had been going to this online, you know, it was every Sunday night where we would meditate together for an hour, and then we'd have like a 1 hour talk about some, you know, wisdoms or things like that. And he always had a bunch of artifacts in the back, now that you say that. But I didn't know that Tibetan people or Tibetan, you know, Buddhists had a lot of artifacts. Absolutely.
Yeah, they have what's called the dorje. It's they have the dorje, and they have statues of the Lama, of the Buddha. I have a statue. I have 3 statues in my bedroom of Chenrezig, of the Buddha. And then I have a 3D printed Buddha that my last roommate made for me. And that one just kind of symbolizes the connection between this crazy new manufactured world and how it can connect us, what's real. But in the sense that we lose this ability to connect to things in the world, where things lose their magic, when people lose their magic, when our friends, our family members, relatives, coworkers, sexual partners, our enemies, our strangers, they lose their interior structure. They lose their sovereignty when they're converted into data, when they're converted into what you mentioned a moment ago about how we present ourselves in this like 2-dimensional black hole called social media. You know, like it kills people. I don't think you have to be admitted to a hospital without a pulse to be dead nowadays. We present ourselves in this 2-dimensional flatland, and we say that that's real, it's so convenient that it may as well be real. You know, we mistake convenience for reality. I think if there was a real life memory police, they would find Facebook very useful, because nothing lasts or endures on a computer screen or on a phone or in social media, or even in
the media.
Yeah. It's one thing after the other. It's like Sogyal Rinpoche says, like chewing cud. Thought after thought after thought, accumulating one after the other. And I found it interesting, you said earlier, like people would think that in a Buddhist way of saying things, that meditation might be like bad, whatever. Of course they think it's bad. Of course they would, because it frees you, because you can't be prisoner when you're not accepting the reality, this fleeting lightning speed reality that doesn't make any sense. You can only make something like that make sense if you just flash it fast enough in repetition in front of my face, like the frames of an animation or something like that. But with a good mindful approach to things, I think we can stay grounded. I think so. And we can be very creative too.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting, everything you just said. Do you remember, I'm going to switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you remember when we first met?
Yes.
You gave me your card.
Was that at Charlie's?
It was at Charlie's Star Lounge.
Yeah.
I've been holding that card in my little bag since that night. I was like, okay,
awesome.
Just like collecting people's, little things that people give me or whatever. And I remember I told you, I was like, hey, I think I'm going to start a podcast.
Yeah.
And Wanz was just on it. Well, it was like just the beginning, because I hadn't I didn't post Wanz Dover's episode, but he's going to be on it soon.
Awesome.
And that night, well, eventually later, I mean, we never really saw each other again until
Denton, right?
Until Denton, yeah. Well, I reached out to you on Instagram recently.
Mm-hmm.
The good parts of social media, I do like that it creates like this easy connection, ability to connect on social media. But definitely lately I've been kind of going into, when you said prisoner, I feel like I've been going into becoming a prisoner to social media. It's so easy to get caught up in that train. It's just like,
it's like being kidnapped.
Yeah.
Social media, it's a kidnapping tool for the psyche, for the ego. It inflates a two-dimensional version of our ego, not the healthy ego. I think it's good to have a healthy ego.
Yeah, of course.
But this one that is dependent upon infinite repetition and lightning fast speed and comprehension. Evolution did not endow us with the hardware to really cope with such a fast-paced, and you're a data scientist, you know this. You could talk about this, I bet, for like 15 hours. Like,
well, I would say
if you're sorting data together, correct me, I'm wrong. Data has to be comprehensible, right?
Yeah, you have your raw data and then you transform it to information, and that information can give us knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So you mean like it's just like so much information coming at us at one time?
It was junk information.
That's for sure. Like whenever I'm looking at the news or whatever, it's just a bunch of junk on there that some algorithm tells me what I want to see.
Yeah.
I noticed I quit drinking in the beginning of this year. I went about like 5-6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to notice that I was a lot more stable emotionally. Even though I was only drinking on the weekends, just taking that out, I had a lot more energy. I was a lot more productive. I felt like I had the capacity to handle, hardships when they came along. And the second thing I started to notice was like food. Food really affects me in my mood. If I'm, eating chicken tenders, mac and cheese, ice cream, and then French fries, and I'm not eating anything like good, my stomach, the upper part of my stomach, the actual stomach, it really hurts, and it affects my mood. It affects my energy. I don't want to like give myself to things that I love. So I try to fix that, and exercising also, like stretching the body, it like releases tension in areas that I think stress kind of gets stagnant.
Yeah.
And so yoga has been really good. And then the final thing, what was it? Social media. Social media is something that I'm starting to realize, like I've always kind of known it, but here's the correlation. So if you use social media more, I feel like the more I think, and the more I have negative thoughts increases. So it has like this positive correlation. But the thing is, it's on the other side, it's like a vape, it's so addicting. Sometimes you vape too much. You're like, oh, why did I do that? It makes me feel like shit.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's like, you still keep wanting it.
Yeah. That is the nature of addiction, isn't it? You mentioned alcohol, and, Tubten Chodron talks a lot about the effects of alcohol, because the Buddha says we're not supposed to have intoxicants, even though a lot of other Tibetan mystics drank a considerable amount of alcohol. It was because they didn't have ways of purifying water. And
I heard that.
Yeah, the whole thing. But alcohol, Tubten Chodron, and forget the Buddhist approach to it, doctors and scientists, and the effects of, and this is something I've definitely, alcohol has taken a big second seat in my life. Because of what I've learned about alcohol, actually has an effect on the body that a lot of people don't know about. It increases the amount of cortisol. It increases the cortisol threshold in the body. Even I've read this stuff online. If anyone's listening to this and you're like a doctor or whatever, and you're like Phillip's wrong or whatever, I'm just going off of what I've seen on the internet and heard from experts. I'm not a doctor. Don't come after me. Even just one alcoholic beverage can open up your cortisol threshold by like 15%. The reason it does that is because the experience of euphoria that we have while we're drunk is actually catalyzed by stress hormones. You can kind of think of it maybe in a weird kind of way. Like when I'm drunk, I'm very kind of euphoric, but also I want to talk a lot. I kind of want to engage a lot, or some train of thought comes along and I really want to follow it in some weird kind of way. That's cortisol. The alcohol is the numbing agent, but the stress hormones are very much active when we're drunk. So the next day, when the numbing agent works off, what do we have?
A hangover?
Horrible hangover, stress, elevated heartbeat, dehydration, confusion. And if you're bad enough, you could die, So it's for those reasons why. And also sugar. Alcohol has a lot of sugar. Converts it into glucose.
Well, I think with the beer, the carbohydrates convert into glucose, but I'm not sure about hard liquor or anything, because like the hard seltzers, you see it's got, less than a gram of sugar or whatever, and like 2 carbs.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure, but I do think a lot of people are drinking cocktails and they're drinking
really sugary
drinks. Yeah, ciders. They have so much sugar.
Yeah, sugar causes inflammation in the body. And to link back to what you said a moment ago about coping with the vicissitudes and the problems that we have in our lives, scientists have found a powerful causal link between inflammation and depression. And everyone knows that depression is a direct comorbidity with anxiety and unhappiness. So, it's a good reason to definitely manage the amount of that intoxicant that we put in our bodies. And back on the creative tip, that's definitely something that affects creativity. Maybe in the moment we feel a little bit more creative if we're drunk or whatever, but it's not a sustainable source of fuel.
It's definitely not. That, and what before, Christmas, I was starting the podcast and I was working full time, and I was also drinking, socializing, partying. And what I realized was I was getting so overwhelmed because I just didn't have the energy to say work on the podcast on the weekends. And I would, I can't go into podcasts, having went out last night and feeling hungover today.
Yeah.
And I decided it's like I had to choose between alcohol or, podcasting, especially in the beginning when you're trying to do all the brand development and you're trying to just get into the flow of like what it is. And this week I was drinking a lot. I was like going out and drinking again. And yesterday I just felt horrible. Like so much anxiety. I felt was aware of the negative thoughts coming into my brain. And so I was supposed to go to like a little house party thing last night that a friend was throwing, but I couldn't go. It was like, I want to be better at making decisions for myself and doing what's best for myself and not worrying so much about fear of missing out and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's definitely a grass is greener issue. Whenever I think about FOMO, whenever I feel like I'm missing out on something, it's definitely a situation where more often than not, I think that the grass is greener on the other side. I'm bored or someone's having more fun than me. This is just projection, really. It's literally an act of creation. We create a transitional object out of something that we don't even know anything about. We don't know what could happen. I don't know. If I had went out last night and drank or something like that, maybe I could have gotten hit by a car. Maybe I would have overdrank and been like 5 hours late for this show or something. We're always in a position of creation. Like you said not too long ago in this conversation, we're always creating. If something seems better than what we're already doing, and this goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning, like wherever you go, there you are. You always come back to you. We always come back to ourselves. There's something better out there, some ideal, some perfect concept of success out there. I created that, and it has to fit my parameters at all times. How else? How couldn't it? As if there's like some kind of perfect party that I'm just waiting to happen. I could probably make that party happen.
You probably could.
Yeah. I don't have to like go out and attend other people's events all the time. Oh, I like going to other people's events, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't see how helpful it is to constantly idealize the other thing rather than just allow that other thing to have its place, its thingness, to allow it to just be a thing, to not know it. That's another thing that social media does to our brains. It makes us afraid to not know because, ever since the scientific revolution, we've taken God out of the picture. We've taken all the gods. We took all the gods, we put them in an Amazon box and we shipped it back to the sender. And now we're like, no, we have science now. We have technology and we can unravel everything now and compartmentalize it fully. And this has created our current social paradigm where we feel like everything has to be knowable. Everything can be knowable. If it can be knowable, it should be known. And that's led to a lot of wonderful miracles in engineering and medicine and technology, research, anthropology, you name it. But it's also created the atomic bomb. It's created, we had transportation, for example. Transportation is insane. I can't imagine what a caveman or a nomadic tribe from the 1200s would think about a car, about my shitty Honda. They probably think it was like something from heaven, right? But they wouldn't know that cars kill more people than wars do now, So that goes back to, is the grass always greener through success or through engineering, technology, and medicine? Medicine kills millions of people a year, but maybe we're close to curing cancer. Is the grass always greener? Oftentimes we find ourselves exactly where we started after embarking on some wild enterprise. We have scientific FOMO. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I'm totally following everything. Everything you just said was making all my wheels turn.
There it is. Yeah.
Cool. So you lived in Dallas your whole life.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you love about here that makes you want to stay?
What do I love about Dallas that makes me want to stay?
Or
my friends.
Why do you want to stay in Dallas, Texas? I don't know if I can edit what I said before but you're living in Dallas and you've tried out other geographic locations and you're like, you know what? I want to stay in Dallas. That is something that I think I deal with mentally, is like,
why?
Staying in one place forever.
Why?
It's scary to me.
What frightens you about it?
What frightens me is the curiosity I have, that not being quenched. I want to see the world. I want to see other cultures. I think the most personal development my growth spurts essentially personally came from going to a new country, not knowing the language, not having the same humor as that culture of people, just surviving and adapting, and teaches you so many things about yourself. And I feel like I grew a lot personally, and I want to keep growing. I want to keep learning. And I am surprised a lot of the times that, how many different foods that I haven't tried that, I could fall in love with. And how many different, changing up little ways of doing things. That it's like, maybe you fold your clothes. This is a silly example, but maybe you fold your shirt one way your whole life and you thought this is how you're supposed to fold shirts. And then someone shows you a different way of folding a shirt and it can blow your mind.
Where was the first place you traveled to?
Russia.
Russia.
Yeah, I was like 13. My dad was a pastor. And we went on a volunteer trip to orphanages to bring school supplies. And yeah, I remember seeing the poster up in school in the church, because we would travel 1 hour north to a church that my dad was an assistant pastor at. I saw the poster and I told my dad, I'm going to this. And he said, well, you need to pray to God and ask him, because otherwise, that's not where God wants you to be. So I went home, I prayed. I was like, God wants me to go. He told me just now. And he's like, okay, well, if God wants you to go, then God will help you raise the money. And so I was like, oh, dang. So I wrote a letter with my dad's help and sent it out to all the family members. People would send me like $20, $30. And
awesome.
And then we did some fundraisers, and I think my dad was just like super impressed that I had raised so much money. And so but I didn't have enough to go. And so he just gave me the rest.
That's awesome.
And I went, and I grew up in a 6,000 person town. I didn't know anyone.
Where did you grow up?
Sweetwater, Tennessee.
Sweetwater, Tennessee.
It's about 10, 11,000 now. But when I was there, it was 6,000. We were very isolated. There was no major city, 45 minutes to an hour away. And I moved there, and I was living there, grew up there essentially, my most important years of growth, and went to Russia, and my mind was shook.
Yeah.
It was completely different. It's like
you went alone? You were alone?
No, I was in a group of like 10.
Okay, cool.
10 people maybe.
Yeah.
And we took a big flight there. We were there for 2 weeks. I'm pretty sure we went to Ukraine, but some like very rural areas where the orphanages were. And we were in Moscow, and we were like throwing some Christian youth concerts and things like that as like a safe place to gather for youth. And yeah, I had my first kiss in Russia.
Oh, how sweet. Wow.
Yeah, that's when I knew I was gay. No, I'm just kidding. This girl, her name was Milka. I just realized this the other day. I was maybe 12 or 13 at this time, and I think I had never kissed anyone yet. And someone gave me some Milka chocolate, and I remembered that girl, and I was like, she gave me the chocolate. She was like, I have a present for you. And she gave me the Milka chocolate. Yeah. And then she just like grabbed my face and kissed me. Oh. And I melted. I was like, holy shit. Like,
that's really sweet.
I just got kissed by a girl. Like, I was like freaking out, like probably in a very nervous, anxious way.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't expecting it. But
do you feel like that catalyzed maybe a little bit your desire to be abroad and to discover more of yourself outside of
1,000%. Yeah. When I got home, the first thing I did was print off a list of every country in the world. And I crossed off Russia, Ukraine, and United States.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm going to go. I knew then I was like going to study abroad in college. So I had been, thinking about this all through high school that I wanted to go abroad. And yeah, again, like my parents couldn't pay for my study abroad trip. So I just I was working like 30 hours per week at the restaurant. I was working at the school for my scholarship, like 10 hours per week. And I eventually saved up enough money. And then I took out a student loan and went to and did a semester in Costa Rica. And then after that, I was like itching for more. And there was an opportunity at my university that was connecting students to a job in Spain. And it was like a tuna biology lab assistant job. And I got the grant, and I went and lived in Spain for summer in a little beach town called Cadiz. Mm-hmm. Then I was like, I want to do my master's degree abroad, and I wanted to go to California, that sense of going out west. We have that American, thought process of moving out west is a sign of freedom. So I was applying for jobs in California, and I got my first job there. But then I got the scholarship for my master in Portugal and Germany and Spain, and went out there. But then the pandemic hit. So we were like locked away. And
do you still feel locked down or stuck in Dallas? Or
yeah, so I guess bills were starting to knock on my door for like private student loans and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, because after I finished my master, I moved to a little beach town called Costa Caparica in Portugal.
Oh, in Portugal, all right.
And I was living out there, and I was selling kombucha to the beach restaurants, but I was like barely surviving. So it was just time for me to get a job in my field and start like paying off my debt.
But now you probably feel like you're barely surviving in Dallas.
Yeah. The cost of living is way better in Portugal, but
wherever you go.
But it's like the more money you make, the more you spend.
Yeah.
And so you keep wanting to, you're like, okay, if I just get this raise, I'm going to get the better apartment. I'm going to, start shopping at Whole Foods or, whatever it may be. You always find a way to like start spending more of that income.
Yeah. That happens to me all the time.
I have to keep myself in check constantly, like with spending money, just not spending, because I really have to focus on my financial goals of just being debt free.
I totally hear you on that. You are preaching to the choir. I don't even have any debt. I just live paycheck to paycheck. I just, saving money can be hard for me because I missed that class in high school. Middle school and high school, whatever class it was, they teach you how to manage money. I was asleep.
Well, shit. I mean, the only way, I don't even save any money right now. I just throw all of my money toward my debt. And I always feel like you're saving to spend some eventually, right?
Yeah, of course.
And I think for me, it's like, I cannot see that money. They have to take it out of my check immediately for me not to spend it.
I read a statistic not long ago that 60 to 70% of Americans of all categories live paycheck to paycheck. They're not saving.
It's heard that too.
It's becoming a thing of the past. I think it's quickly becoming a thing of the past. And it's coming into reality in tandem with everything else being transient like that. Money being this transient thing. Everything's a subscription service. Now, for example, you can get a subscription service for like food delivered to your house for so many different things. Like the rate at which money collection happens for services and goods and stuff is now it's like monthly. Even when you buy like software, some of the software I use, like you can't just buy it anymore. You get a subscription to it so they can guarantee that you're locked in for like a year, So yeah, it's strange for me to think if people are becoming broker or if all the money is just accumulating in one focal point somewhere, or if money itself and its value is changing over time. I'd have to read a book about that or learn a little bit more about it to be able to speak on it.
Yeah, I also have that same, it's kind of scary to think about how my dad was, taking care of a family of 5 on like more than half of what I make, you know? And he bought a house and I'm just alone and like, that just blows my mind.
My dad he was fresh out of medical school and he bought a huge house in Preston Hollow here in Dallas. He bought a huge house. He had a military pension, I think, and he had some money from other things that he was doing, medical things that he was doing. But I mean, that's unprecedented. My dad, when they bought the house, I think he was 32 or 33. That's insane. And it was a huge house.
Yeah.
It's like, what? How is this magic to people, to us, people like us now? It's like, how did you, huh?
And now it's a property, like they bought it 20 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
And now it's worth.
Now that house is worth, I think,
millions.
like $2 million.
Yeah.
And my parents did not pay that. They owned that house and it was not worth that when they got it. Yeah, it's definitely a thing.
Yeah, that would have been prime real estate, investing in Preston Hollow back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's where George Bush lives.
Yeah. We also lived next to, what's the guy who owned the Cowboys, Dallas Cowboys, Tom Landry, I think.
Yeah.
We lived next to him. And then there was an actor who wasn't very popular, but owned a house in that same neighborhood. I forget his name. But, yeah, on the subject of traveling, where will you go next?
Where will I go next? I am either thinking...
And how long is your list? I'm so curious now.
It's super long still. I've only been to Central America, Europe, and United States. A lot of states around here, but I want to start working my way through the Balkans. So
Lithuania, right?
That's the Baltic.
Oh,
states.
sorry. Sorry.
No, I'm not going to edit it out.
Oh, no. Right.
I was keeping it.
That's fine.
It's fine. I always get them mixed up too because I'll always say, what is like
the ball something. I was like,
the ball states. Yeah. So that's going to be like Croatia.
Oh, Croatia's amazing. I love Croatia.
Yeah. Have you been?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love it.
Croatia. And then there's, Greece and then Macedonia and Bulgaria and Hungary, like just going through that area, Slovenia.
Let me know when you go to Croatia, I got a guy who will be the perfect guide for. He grew up in Zagreb.
Oh, nice.
Was in Croatia, actually in the pandemic. So, oh wow, can I say that? Oh no, I can. It was legal. So Croatia was one of the states, European countries where Americans could travel. There was like maybe 3. There was very few of them. And I traveled there, and a guy who owns one of the record labels who I release on called Burek. His name's Mislav. He grew up in Zagreb. So Zagreb is this beautiful. So he was an excellent guy. He took us everywhere around there, and it was amazing. If you go to Zagreb or go to Croatia, let me know and I'll hook you up with him.
Definitely. So you've traveled around the world a lot too. I heard from you when we first met. Where have you been?
I have been North America, Canada. I've been to every state well, that's interesting. I've been to every state in the United States, I think, except for Michigan. Michigan, which is the one place where I probably should have been.
I know, from Detroit music scene.
Yeah, for some reason, I've just never been. I've never stepped foot inside of Michigan, not even once. And I've been all over Canada, Vancouver, British Columbia, Toronto, all over Canada. I've been in Mexico, Mexico City, Tulum, Cancun, Nava, Mexico. In Europe, I've been all over the UK, Germany, Croatia. I'd like to eventually go a little bit further east, but I feel like if you kind of look at the map that I'm creating, it's kind of slowly pushing further east. So eventually we'll get over there.
But you've been to Croatia and anywhere else in Europe?
Belgium, Croatia, Germany, you name it. I've been there in the UK. I've never made it. I haven't made it to Bristol yet in the UK. Haven't made it there yet. But
why were you in UK?
Playing music shows. Yeah, or hanging out. I have a good friend who lives in he used to live in Leeds, but now he lives in Huddersfield in the UK. And I like going to visit him. He's got a little boy now and a wife, so it's a little bit harder to visit. Busy dad, but
yeah.
Go and play music in Manchester, London, Liverpool. Did
you ever make it up to Glasgow in Scotland?
No, I have not been to Glasgow. No, I have not been to Scotland. Been to Dublin though. Dublin, Ireland twice.
Yeah, I've only been to London, but I did the ancestry test, and I think I have a lot of heritage from London and Glasgow and, throughout Britain. But then the other, 40% was German, in the Northwest Rhine.
Have you been to Germany?
Yeah, I was in Berlin.
Oh, wait, yeah, of course you've been to Germany. You're in Berlin, right?
I've probably been to all the big cities except for Cologne. I've never been to Cologne.
No, I've never been to Cologne.
Been to Frankfurt, Dusseldorf. My university was in Münster. And I've been to Berlin. I've been to Dresden. Yeah, I think I've taken trains all around. And yeah, I've been to Switzerland, Austria. I've been to a lot of the European countries, but the ones that I'm missing are the Balkans and the Nordic countries.
Oh.
So Sweden, Norway.
Norway is beautiful.
They're more expensive, so I've been kind of holding those off. And then the Baltic countries, I've never been to those.
Yeah, I've been to Norway 3 times. It is it's expensive. It's like Japan almost. I've not been to Japan, but I know Japan's expensive. Norway is beautiful. I highly recommend.
Did you see the Northern Lights?
No, I did not.
You didn't?
No, I didn't. I just saw a lot of snow and ice.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I didn't see the Northern Lights when I was there. None of those times.
For some reason, I can picture you just touring through India or just Southeast Asia with electronic music. They love electronic music over there.
I've yet to meet the right people who are connected in those parts of Asia, the East, to the kind of music that I'm making. I haven't met them yet. If they're out there, I hope I meet them sooner than later.
Yeah, maybe I can connect you. I know some.
Please.
A Berlin DJ in Grizzly Adams. He went and toured through India a lot.
Why does that name sound so familiar to me? Grizzly Adams.
That would be insane if you know Grizzly Adams.
Sounds so familiar to me. I don't know why.
Yeah, he's a good friend of my good friend Till. So he's the one that did the the Buried Dreams first, you know, series for me. It made the album cover and everything.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Love them both. But yeah, he did a lot of touring through there. So I'm sure maybe he knows someone.
Please hook me up.
I went to your show last weekend in Denton and I loved it. It was so good.
I'm glad you had fun.
It was super experimental. You were playing live on top of some software, or you were playing songs and then mixing it as the songs were playing?
The drum loops, bass lines, string parts, sound effects, and all that are each triggered or played live or launched, if you want to say so. When a part in the song changes, it's because I'm selecting new kind of snapshots that are assigned to each little instrument, each discrete instrument, which lives in the computer as a virtual instrument or a VST. And there's another component called, I'm sure you know, MIDI information that just tells those instruments what to do. And I kind of just guide it along a certain kind of a pathway. If you can imagine like a painter with an easel in front of them, and what do you call the thing that they hold on the hand with the paint?
The palette?
Yeah, the palette. Yeah. I have a palette of sounds and instruments that I'm just kind of painting live using the software MIDI controller.
Yeah, the sound kind of gave a little bit more, it's not hip hoppy, but it has that like kind of sound that you can like move to. I think sometimes each genre, it's hard to say genre for electronic music, but each, you know, subset of like sounds, like I felt like with it being was playing more electro, and then you had Wanz that was focusing more on techno, and then I felt like you were playing the sounds that you're playing. I can tell because I love to dance, and the way that I can move to different types of electronic music varies a lot. There's some like the electro music, I feel like you're just like doing like a hard like dance side to side. There's not a lot of like variation, but I feel like when you play with the sounds and you create that variation, you can like move with the sounds more, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, I like to do a little bit more of a soulful melodic approach to it than a lot of other people. I'm even accused sometimes of being too melodic, too too whimsical, too soulful. That it's not good for the dance floor. That it's not driving enough. It's not very dance floor club friendly. I hear that all the time. Yeah.
Well, I felt like I didn't have any issues dancing to it. I almost felt like I could dance better and more dynamically than.
Well, you're part of the family now. You're part of the Cygnus collective, the soulful.
And you're part of the Buried Dreams collective.
Yes. Yes.
Unite.
We did it.
I love it.
Yeah.
I loved the show. I really did. And my friend Joe came, and he also was like super impressed. So
yeah, that's one of my favorite things is when people come to a show or a gig of like anything, like whenever somebody tries out something but new is a really easy word to use. Something that, you know, it's mysterious to them, or they have no idea what to expect. That they could expect that they could be disappointed, or they could have their socks blown off. One or the other, they just don't know. I like that. I like when that kind of anticipation, when someone has an open mind and tries something out and walks away with it, having been altered by that experience in some way, rather than what you can observe with some people, which is kind of going to an event or a concert or watching a movie or listening to a song or something and already having a preconceived notion of what that experience is supposed to be like, how it's supposed to conform to their expectations. They walk into the experience with a filter already applied to everything. So I love when people have open minds and they're willing to take upon, like we were talking about earlier, that kind of like childlike understanding or way of looking at the world, taking off that mental filter and just like, you know, getting mentally naked and just letting the world just be a thing unto itself. It's really something. I'm really glad you had a great time too. I met your friend Joe, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a really sweet guy.
He's a sweet guy. He's one of my favorites here in Dallas.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you guys had a great time.
Yeah, we really did. So this is a question that I ask every guest. What is your buried dream? And this can be something that you're trying to realize in the short term and long term. Some creative goals for yourself. Where do you see yourself ideally as an artist?
Yeah. Right now, I would say my buried dream. I don't know. Buried, it's not dead, but it's like.
No, buried dream is just like something that hasn't been manifested yet that's inside of you.
Yeah.
So it's like you could have a short-term dream of like you have a fashion show that you're envisioning for 6 months from now. Nothing's been organized, but it's a buried dream. It's buried inside of me and I'm digging it up.
Yeah.
And then in a long-term buried dream would be something, if you could be the ideal artist and you say, this is good enough for me. I'm ready to, I could die now.
Yeah.
What would that look like?
Right now it's a full-length 3D animated musical experience, probably about 45 minutes to an hour in length. And that's something that's been buried inside of me since I was very, very young. And I would see things on television and in like magazines and reading books, these visual concepts that would really speak to me. And I really wouldn't know why at the time. Something about observing flat shaded polygons that would change colors and something about shapes and geometry. I was bad at every subject in school except for geometry growing up, by the way, which was really interesting to me. I excelled in geometry, and it was through geometry that I actually learned algebra. I was horrible in algebra and arithmetic and calculus and everything else. But when I took a geometry class, then I learned all the other mathematics through that, which was interesting. That there is this aspect of the world where, like Apple are redesigning their UI stuff to have more curved surfaces, right? Because they're like, well, there's no naturally occurring squares and rectangles and octahedrons in nature. I'm like, that's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. There's these crystal meteorites that you can see in museums and other places, people's collections, where it's like it's a rectangle, a naturally occurring rectangle.
I also heard this on a TV show. There was like a treasure hunting TV show, and they said that if you see right angles when you're doing some archaeological dig or you're like going beneath the surface, seeing things underwater, if you see a right angle, then that was made by humans.
Yeah.
So you'll know that it was some remains of some human artifact.
Mm-hmm. But there are plenty of things that have flat surfaces and are perfectly geometrically pristine. Meteorite rocks. There are like crystals that have totally flat sides, and they're pristine. They're beautiful, and they're very strong too. And so in the 3D world, we see a lot of that. Especially in the stuff that I'm doing. I like this appearance or this visual aspect of things to where they morph and they look organic, but they're also very artificial looking. But that brings into question to me, like, is something artificial just because it doesn't look natural, or does something look unnatural just because it doesn't, you don't see it, you wouldn't see it in like a zoo or in an arboretum? Does it necessarily mean that it doesn't look beautiful or natural? Things like that have always pushed the envelope for me since I was really young, seeing things that look strange, things that piqued my curiosity, and these strange things that just looked odd. And my buried dream is to kind of maybe dig up some of those things that were stimulated by motion graphics from the 80s and the 90s and kind of give my take on that right now. Yeah. So I'm working on that right now, and I should have something by October or November, maybe, to maybe some full length thing, maybe.
Is it something that you could project on a screen?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm going to have my 1 year party. It's going to be like a Buried Dreams exclusive party. And I would love for you to project that. It's like
poetic. That would be poetry if that happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mention it here and then actually, yeah, got it.
Yeah. And it'll probably be like the first week of December. And
that's my birthday.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So we'll celebrate that and have a little exhibition. So I'm going to invite everyone that's on the podcast. and have each person can bring like 1 or 2 guests. And so whoever is a producer or a DJ or whatever, I want it to be like a celebration of the arts. So everyone can put something in to the party that if they want. And so it could be like somebody's DJing music, exhibiting their art, or nothing. But I think that would bring about 90 people, and it would be like a really cool party.
I don't know why you would ever have FOMO, because clearly you have this idea of how to throw the coolest sounding party I've heard of in a long time.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I want it to be like a networking event for everyone to, the artists in Dallas that are part of that first year Buried Dreams Collective to like come together and like meet each other, and then let that grow over time. I want to like build a hub of artists here and like bring everyone together and to like in a community sense.
Amazing.
And let everyone shine and like everyone collaborate. And I think that's how we can build the scene here in Dallas, is through networking and collaboration and just connecting with one another.
I'm so happy to hear that. I really am. That's something that's missing. It really is.
It is. That is a piece. I would like to see Dallas come up as like a Chicago or something.
Yeah.
But it takes
There's enough talent here for it. It's just the scattering, and also the unfortunate reality that, promotion and putting on certain kinds of things that would boost, signal boost for a lot of artists costs money. And if you, like me, you have a full-time job, you have to compartmentalize the artistic enterprise. Like we were saying earlier, you have to compartmentalize the artistic enterprise with, putting vegetables on the stove and keeping the lights on. And that requires the help of sponsorship and all that kind of stuff. And there's not a lot of room there. People who put a lot of effort into bringing up artists in a kind of a soloistic way, they're taking a risk. They are, because not every artist is a hit, and they're not always going to make a full return on their investment. So understandably, they'll be careful about that. What the unfortunate result of that I observe is a sort of competition that results. I don't like it. That's my least favorite thing in the world, is when artists are in competition with each other. I used to, in middle school, I had this teacher named Miss Rodstead, and she was one of my favorite teachers of all time. And she always discouraged any form of competition between us when we were in art class, when it was time to deliver a project, or if there was a collaborative kind of thing that 2 or 3 or more students had to work on together. Everything was about experimentation and exploration and combining these vital elements that are inside of us and seeing how that chemistry works out and what the results are. Never measuring or comparing one's own vital components against another person's, but actually working out the chemistry and seeing what kinds of interesting things can come about as a result. So it's always been something that makes me feel, it puts me it's a bad note for me when I see artists compete in the Dallas music scene, or compete or compare. Yeah, it makes me sad.
I think that Dallas doesn't experience that as much as the bigger cities, those saturated markets like New York and LA. And I feel like the competition is so strong there. But in Dallas, I feel like, if you're pretty steady and solid in your craft, you'll come up in Dallas. Like, people will start to know about you.
But I know so many people who don't do anything. They are extraordinarily talented, and they don't do anything because they have this rigidly stratified set of circumstances that have to be ideal for them to do anything. And that always invariably includes them comparing themselves to another artist or another performer or something like that. Or just, getting in their heads, getting trapped into that egotistical framework, that hyperactive preoccupation with the self and what the self stands to gain or lose. I see that happening all the time. I would say that that's definitely related to competitive ideas of artistic enterprise. And I hope that things like this can shine a light in people's eyeballs and say like, hey, let's just like hang out, let's just hang out. Like, you're my friend. Like, I like you.
There's space for everyone.
Yeah, totally. This is Texas. There's nothing but space.
There's space for everyone to have a podcast. There's space for everyone to play with music and and DJ and things like that. So just be creative and just focus on yourself. Everyone's different, and in the process of getting better, it's all about practice and repetition. And I think it's really hard for people these days with this like age of instant gratification to really pour into something and be okay with fucking it up in the beginning, being shitty at it. You really have to be shitty at it at first and accept it, and don't be too hard on yourself, and caress your inner artist child and say like, there, you did it. Look what you made, and just over time, you'll react. You learn something new and you'll react, and you'll say, okay, I can tweak this. And eventually you'll get to a point where you create a product that is superb.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's so beautiful what you just said. And what's implied also with the age of instant gratification is its opposite. It's its polar opposite. What's the opposite of gratification? It's disappointment. We live in the age of instant gratification, and therefore instant disappointment as well. These high frequency reactions to totally neutral data, totally neutral events, mundane things such as gratification and disappointment. They're totally mundane experiences. They just happen. They don't have any meaning or quality in and of themselves, but they happen so quickly now. They happen so fast. They happen rapid fire. This happened to me the other day when I really wasn't being mindful and paying attention to myself and my mind. There was a guy who I met at that show in Denton, and he added me either to Instagram or Facebook, and I don't remember, but I forgot to like add him back or whatever. And I had this feeling. I was like, oh fuck, he's gonna think I'm a fucking asshole. I went that fast into concluding like that meant something about me as a person. This happened in like 4.5 seconds. I was like, oh fuck, I'm an asshole. This is it. This is the end.
It's like you start creating this idea in his head, like these falsifications, like, oh, this guy is gonna think that I'm like better than everyone, or like I didn't want to follow him back. I totally get that. It
happens so quickly,
and then that thought, like if you're not aware of it, can start eating away at you. You can be like, oh, like now everyone hates me kind of thing. It's just easy to spiral out of control.
It accumulates. It's just one thing after the other.
Yeah. And so what about your long-term goal? Where do you see yourself long-term?
I don't have any long-term goals. I'm doing exactly right now. I know what I was sent here to do. So I have it all figured out. I know that sounds so pompous and bullshit, but it's
not pompous and bullshit. I think it's wise.
I have it all figured out. I know exactly what I came here to do. It's just simply a matter of organizing myself in these creative enterprises around having a full-time job at this point. That's all it is. That's all that's left. That's the last rung that's the last step to take up the stairwell to those dreams, is how am I going to do all of this and also keep vegetables on the stove and a roof over my head and a pillow to rest my head on, That's the last bit. I know that I just want to do 3D motion graphic features and music and make cool presentations that'll stimulate people's minds. That's all I got to do. As so far as where I am that I do that, whatever place facilitates that, if it's Dallas, if it's some place in Europe or Japan, wherever, doesn't matter. I'm going to be doing the same thing no matter where I am. Just hopefully with a supportive community of folks who also stimulate my imagination and, keep me thinking, they don't let me get too comfortable to that degree. Yeah. I mean, I have it all figured out. It's just got to figure out the money thing.
It's a valid, it's a valid concern.
Yeah.
I would love to just be a full-time artist too, and not have to work and just
full steam ahead.
Yeah. I would love to get into more music stuff, things I haven't explored, or I would like to, paint and draw and, maybe sew and, podcast, do media stuff. I like that. I think it's really fun. Like even acting, I think I would love to.
You would be an awesome voice actor.
A voice actor for Animation?
Anything where your voice is narrating something. Oftentimes in this conversation. I never
thought about that.
Yeah. In this conversation, if my eyes trail off a little bit, I'm listening to your voice and I'm imagining like an icy field or something and like some penguins crawling across and you're just like, this is Pogo the penguin. And
this is Pogo the penguin.
Yeah, perfect. That kind of thing. I think you'd be perfect.
He spends his days sliding around on glaciers and snow patches.
Everybody who's listening to this, please get an Elle's head and let's have this person do this. It's about time. The podcast is proof.
Yeah, I'm gonna just start reading audiobooks and taking some income that way.
Do it, please. I would listen to every single one. I promise.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah.
I never thought about that ever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my voice when I was younger, it used to be super high pitched and I sounded like a child. So anytime I was like talking in the background, someone would be like, are you around a kid right now? And it's just me.
Yeah, I hear that.
So I think for a long time, I felt insecure about my voice. But starting this podcast, the voice part was not what made me cringe and feel super vulnerable. It was...
What was it?
The content.
Sure.
The use of filler words. I know when my personality is being contained.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I wasn't feeling like myself or like the person I could be, like the silly, like let go and free spirited person that, you know that I am. And so sometimes I felt kind of contained. So like listening to myself, it didn't sound like myself. And I could tell that I was like feeling uncomfortable in the beginning. So that's what would make me cringe.
I totally hear you. Yeah, I got you.
Do you have any cringe moments?
Oh, so many. So many. Cringe moments like on stage and music or just generally speaking?
Not generally speaking. I'm talking more about with your craft, your artistic craft, because I know we all have cringe moments all the time in daily life.
My cringe moments are usually kind of like I just described when you meet like really cool people at shows. And okay, this is just going to be my confession right here. I'm going to confess this.
Confess.
This happens to me all the time because I play shows all around the world, all throughout the year. And I meet hundreds of people who love me and I love them. They support me and they're awesome. There is no way at all when all of these relationships are mediated through a website that I can remember everyone's name. So my cringe moments hit an odious, painful apex when I'm overseas and someone comes up to me before or after a show and they're like, Phillip, hey. And I recognize their face. I recognize the sound of their voice. I remember the last time I saw them, but I can't remember their name for fuck all for its worth of me as a human being. I just can't remember their name. And those are my hardcore cringe moments. It happens all the time. And it's people that I've known I feel like my brain is like this database that has like a limited hard drive space. And the more people I meet, if I go without like a year without seeing you and I've met like 20 or 30 new people in that span of time, your name just gets knocked off of the hard drive.
You go into long-term storage.
Yeah, long-term storage. And it's so, this has even happened with people in Dallas who I've known for decades, and I've thought like, oh my God, am I just getting old? Am I not eating enough ginkgo biloba? Am I just not getting enough?
You need more goji berries.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah. It's like,
no, I think it's absolutely normal.
Yeah.
I think we all are guilty of that. Usually, sometimes I don't even know the place that I know the person, but their face and
their essence
feels very familiar.
Yeah.
And yeah, they'll say my name or whatever and who they know me through and where they met me. And it's just like, doesn't come back to my head, but I do my best to just not say their name. Yeah. I mean, just like make it to seem like,
I just give him the biggest hug possible.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I'm so happy to see you again. And then I wait for someone else. If I have, this is another confession. If I'm there with someone else who I know that knows them, then, or doesn't know them, then I'll say, hey, this is my friend so-and-so.
Oh gosh, that's a classic one. I do it too.
They'll say,
and I'll just be like,
and then I'm like, oh yeah, I knew it.
Yeah.
It's a cheat.
Or you're like, it's a cheat, but it works.
It does work. Yeah.
Like, this is my friend Wanz. And they're like, hi, nice to meet you. And then they're like, oh, I'm Sally. Sally Mae.
Yes, it worked. Did it.
Or sometimes I've had people like come up to me and ask me to go introduce myself and find their name. And so then I can come back and tell them.
That's a good one too. Back on what you said about like, I remember more than anything how people make me feel. People, how their essence, their soul, they're kind of like their spirit or their gaze. I always remember people's gaze if they're the type of person to look deeply or to kind of look away or to kind of their eyes meander, or if their gaze is just kind of like somewhere else while they're talking to you. I always remember where a person is in that kind of conversational spatial environment. And I like that a lot about people. That's my favorite thing about a person, because you can see an entire person's journey oftentimes through the things that they're saying to you, the verbs that they use, the direction that their eyes go when they're talking to you, if they look down a lot when you ask them questions, or if they look up a lot, if they go into their visual space, or if they left and right, if their neck tilts, things like that. It's kind of like they're walking, I'm doing it right now and no one can see it, but the eyes go left, eyes go right.
I'm guilty of that. I had to actively practice keeping eye communication. I think before, when I was younger, maybe I was just like anxious or to make eye contact, or when I want to focus on what I'm saying with somebody that, I don't know, it depends. Like even in regular conversations, like I still like look around to like kind of go to that visual space.
We're naturally going to do that when we think. For me, I trained a little bit in stuff called neurolinguistic programming, NLP, and these scientists who came up with this stuff, they noticed naturally that you can kind of like encode a person's thinking process or the way that they like to think via the direction that their eyes travel while they're talking to you. So it's not something that like right now. Okay. So like right now I'm looking out your window. I'm not looking out of it, but you've probably noticed in this conversation that when I'm retrieving data or trying to finish my sentence, I go here. I'm like, that's my brain just loading or caching that information and getting it ready for delivery, where I'm like, I grew up in Dallas, Texas. And then I look at you and I'm like Pizza Hut. I'm delivering it to the front door. I'm like, here we are now. I'm back again.
Yeah.
I think people are so interesting in that way. And I also had a lot of strong apprehensions about eye contact growing up. I really got over that when I realized through in meditation and the kind of Buddhist philosophy and non-duality that it really helped me to look in other people's eyes when I realized I'm just looking at myself.
Yeah. I never think of like that. That I'm looking at myself in someone's eyes. Did you read that somewhere? Or is that just something that you picked up on your own?
In the non-dualistic framework, it's easy for us to think that I exist at the boundary of my sensory organs and my skin and my eyeballs, my nose, my tongue, my hair, my fingers. But really, all of those factors are dependent upon innumerable factors outside, like the temperature, the gravity, nature, the conditions that were present when I was born, when my parents met each other. And it all goes back, and then we can see at large that this whole entire thing is just one thing, that the universe is just awake and talking to itself, and that the strength of the ego is that determining factor that gives us that isolation value, or that value of individual cut off ego, that I am just myself here. I'm not an object that came out of the world. I'm this alien thing that came into the world, and I'm suspended between two abysses of non-existence before I was born and after I die. But really, I'm more like an apple. I'm more like a palm tree or a pond or a molecule of water. Everything is just one thing. And this concept or this feeling or sense of separation, I think, is just a very powerful hallucination. So it does help to look in another person's eyes and see yourself looking back at yourself. I think it's a very grounding, pleasant sensation, and it's points towards the truth, I feel. You know what I mean?
I think sometimes you need to have these perspective shifts to get over certain things. Because sometimes when you're looking into someone's eyes, maybe you think like, what are they thinking? What are they feeling? What are they seeing? What are they experiencing? But if you just, look at yourself through their eyes, it seems like you can let all of that go.
Absolutely. The eyes of compassion. The eyes of compassion. If someone... we might have a feeling about ourselves that like, I'm not good enough, or I did something wrong, or I cringed. I did something so fucking cringeworthy that my pancreas is going to fall out. I'm cringing so hard. And then we meet somebody and then they say like, oh dude, you're okay. Like you're fine. In that way, when we take upon the voice of the other, not so much, not totally the gaze of the other, but the voice of the other, then we can find healing there and health and happiness and like inner peace, just making considerations that, like you said, a perspective shift, that there's a perspective outside of this focal point that I call my ego, myself, that there's another way of looking at things. I think that's a huge turnkey moment, this precious opportunity we have to really enter back into the world and, connect to God even too, maybe, Mm-hmm. God exists as the other in some philosophies as well. And how often do we go looking for God, but really we're looking for ourselves. We're looking for what we want. We won't listen to God's thoughts. We're listening to our own thoughts.
It's the oneness.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
We're all connected. Everything is connected and it's all one.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. We are.
So we're going to wrap up the podcast now. And I'm wondering if you would allow me to play one of your songs at the end of this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have any exclusive content that you could provide me, or do you want to put out a song that you've already created?
Conversation was so special to me that I'm going to give you an exclusive song that's never been heard before by anybody.
Well, listen to that, folks. We have a Cygnus exclusive coming to the end of this episode, and I hope you guys enjoy it.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
There's so much information that we have to extract. I can feel our mind.